I know this isn't exactly an original point to make in a video like this, but I've always vastly preferred the character of Spider-Man over every other superhero on the market. Whereas many characters have gotten more dark and serious with age, Spider-Man has remained a consistently fun and relatable character to me. You can't even begin to imagine my excitement when I heard that Insomniac Games, a developer responsible for crafting the Spyro trilogy, games that are near and dear to my heart and a big part of my childhood, were going to be the brains behind the next Spider-Man game. Even better, they were going back to the sandbox style of Spider-Man 2. I'm not going to leave you guys in suspense about whether or not the game is good or bad. I'll say this right now, Spider-Man PS4 is one of the best experiences I've had with a video game for at least 5 years. This game single-handedly convinced me to get back into making these dumb videos. First and foremost, if you're worried about not being able to understand the story because you haven't read the comics or whatnot, then don't panic. Marvel's Spider-Man is doing its own thing, and while knowledge of outside material will definitely help you, it is in no way required to get the most out of this game. The game begins with Peter Parker being called to action with the apprehension of Wilson Kingpin Fisk. This intro perfectly sums up the constant struggle that Peter has balancing his own personal life with his hero life. His apartment's a mess, he's short on cash, his suit isn't washed, he has bills to pay, desperately I might add. Even if you knew nothing about Arachnoboy here, you would know within the first 30 seconds what he has to deal with. He's an average dude who just so happens to be really good at cornering crime. Spider-Man dives out the window and just like that, you're already playing. They know what you're here for, so let's get on with it. Kingpin, however, merely serves as the game's opening act. The majority of the story is spent developing the main villain, Martin Lee, or Mr. Negative. Prior to turning evil, he was actually a well-respected member of society who also worked with Peter's Aunt May to run a refuge shelter. I won't go too far into his motivations because I really think you should experience it yourself, but by the end of it, I honestly felt bad for him. We spend a good chunk of the opening hours getting to know him, so it's all the more painful to see him turn out this way. Near the end of the game, Doc Ock also joins the cast of villains, who, unlike previous incarnations of the character, actually has a much closer relation to our main hero. Peter is employed in Octavius Industries, and the game goes to great lengths to show you just how much Peter admires the Doctor, which only makes his final confrontation all the more impactful. Octavius is suffering from a disease that means his body is constantly deteriorating, and he hopes, through the power of science, he'll still be able to utilise his brain to the fullest even when his body eventually gives in. Through constant screw-ups and having a very unstable relationship with this universe's Norman Osborn, the man finally snaps. Yet nobody really likes Norman Osborn in this game. He makes enemies of, well, pretty much everybody actually. He's also the one responsible for creating the Devil's Breath. It was meant to cure any illness, but ends up causing a city-spread epidemic. Whoops. Good job there, Normie. I won't say the man doesn't do some shitty things, but by the end of the game, all the pieces will come together, trust me. That's what I love about this story the most, is that there's never really any truly bad guys here. They do bad things, sure, hell, even unforgivable things, but I do feel for people like Leonardo in particular because, at the end of the day, they were just served a really raw deal that was completely out of their hands. In addition, like great Spider-Man villains often do, each of them have some kind of relation to Peter, developing him as a result. The story is really nicely fleshed out, giving you a good understanding of the type of life Peter lives as a consequence for his superhero powers, getting kicked out of his apartment, struggling to help his Aunt May, mentoring fan favourite character Miles Morales, or untangling the messy web that is his relationship with Mary Jane. Much has been said about how good Insomniac has been able to perfect Spider-Man's controls, which is something we'll get onto later, but I really want to put emphasis on how well written and true to the character this game's script is. This is probably the best portrayal outside of comic books Spider-Man has ever had. The story really gripped me all the way through. It had its times of seriousness, tragedy, and yet never strays too far away from why we like Spider-Man in the first place, that cringy humour. Spider-Man is back to the free roaming of Spider-Man 2. Like that game, you'll need to make sure that there are buildings and other objects for your webs to latch onto if you plan on swinging anywhere. By pressing L2 and R2 in tandem, you can quickly zip to the nearest vantage point. after which you can then jump to cover even greater distances. Wall running and parkour can be a fantastic way of traversing tight spaces, as well as mixing up the already brilliant swinging mechanics. While it doesn't have the same focus on momentum like Pizza Man 2, it nonetheless feels very natural and has a fantastic sense of weight. Once you do get some speed going and that MCU type score kicks in, oh man, there is really no other feeling. Of course, if you don't feel like swinging around like a pillock in his pyjamas, you can always use the fast travel option, which the game hands you early on. I mean, why would I want to do that though? I'm fucking Spider-Man. Now, but seriously, I need to put emphasis on this point and circle it with a huge red Sharpie. Had it been any other game, I would have taken the fast travel option without even thinking about it. Here though, the objective could have been on the other side of the bloody map, and yet I still would have swung all the way there. That, ladies and gentlemen, until this game came along, was why Spider-Man 2 was one of my favourite video games of all time. When the simple act of just existing in a world that the developers have laid out for you is fun, that's when you know you've got a winner on your hands. If the traversal options in a Spider-Man game aren't inherently fun, then you've already failed at making a good Spider-Man game. It's that simple, really. The controls aren't without fault though. Web zipping from point to point can be an exciting experience until the game asks you to be precise with it, and by that I mean the drone challenges. These are not fun, let me tell you. What's really disappointing though is that wall crawling, you know, one of the main abilities in Spider-Man's arsenal, in fact his main ability, that's why he's called Spider-Man, the thing that allows him to do what Spider-Mans can, yet that one, yeah, it's a bit naff, things considered. Often there'll be times where you'll try and turn a corner of a building only to be met with an invisible barrier. In fact, other buildings aren't even programmed to be climbed on at all, and for a Spider-Man game that's just criminal. This problem is somewhat mitigated by the fact that wall running is generally a much faster option, but seriously, when a game from 2000 can pull off this better than a brand spanking new game from an esteemed developer, yeah, that's pretty sad. The stealth I thought was well done, albeit extremely underdeveloped. Using your webs to lure enemies away from each other with your web shots was great fun. Learning the movement patterns in order to get them in a well-placed trip mine, oh, that always brings me satisfaction. Where I think these mechanics could use some work, however, is, well, everything else. In Batman Arkham, once you took out an enemy, they would start to panic and call for backup, which made you switch up your strategies. Here though, you can pretty much go through all the encounters using the exact same strategy and you'll win every time, provided that you know what you're doing. This has the unfortunate consequence of making the stealth mechanics become far too repetitive far too quickly, and that's a damn shame because like I said, I did enjoy what was here. The combat originally fell under scrutiny by members of the gaming public for having what appeared to be gameplay too similar to the Arkham series. Having played the game non-stop a week after it came out though, I can safely say that this is far from a cheap rip-off. I'll grant you that the foundation is undoubtedly inspired by Mr. Tall, Dark and Mopey. I would still argue, however, that Marvel's Spider-Man does a lot to expand on those mechanics and in my opinion comes out the better game. Solely relying on your spider sense is in general a bad idea. Instead, what you need to do is pay close attention to the visual cues given by the enemies in combination with your spider sense in order to figure out the best time to evade. Furthermore, you don't automatically attack the enemy after you dodge their attack, you merely just move out of the way. By using as little as the trigger buttons, you can manipulate your webs in various ways, such as pulling down structures, whacking them with manhole covers, or knocking their ass with a crane. There's even little things you can do, like being able to spring off adjacent walls, and I will never stop feeling like a badass when I dodge a missile mid-swing. Complementing all this and wrapping it up in a nice webby bow is the focus system, by far one of my favourite mechanics in this game. The speed in which your focus bar fills up will depend on how large your combo is. For example, you can use that focus for a super move in order to take one of those shield guys out, which will prevent you from losing your combo. On the other hand, if you take a particularly devastating blow, you can always cash it in later for help. Spidey also has access to some really neat gadgets, such as his iconic web shooters to keep crooks from getting back up, web bombs to slow down the really big guys, and electric webbing. You may be more agile than the Dark Knight, but you are nowhere near as beefy. Without the right suit mods, Spider-Man is essentially a glass cannon. This game instead chooses to prioritise a more crowd-control based approach. Ammo for your weapons is only given to the player through skillful takedowns, adding an extra layer of strategy. It's that quick, in-the-moment thinking that makes Marvel Spider-Man one of the best combat systems I've ever had the pleasure of experiencing in a video game. When first starting up the game, I found the sheer amount of options given to you quite overwhelming, to the point where I died quite a few times learning the ropes. However, the game teaches you so well with a variety of different combat scenarios that by the end of the game I was swinging from webs, catching thieves like flies and just generally doing what a spider can. I guess what I'm trying to say is that this game really makes you feel like Batman. No, fuck. With every task and challenge you complete, you'll gain experience points. Through this, you'll be able to add a new move to your repertoire, giving you that little bit of extra spice to keep combat from getting boring. Along with XP, you'll also get tokens, either by completing one of Taskmaster's various challenges, picking up one of Peter's many forgotten backpacks, or even chasing Hatton in his Happy Pigeon Parade. Unlike other open world games, these collectibles don't feel superfluous. What I mean is that outside of the context of the video game, they feel like a natural part of the world, you know? Like you see the backpacks, for example, when you watch Spider-Man Homecoming and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Peter's a tech whiz, so Bioshock-esque puzzles. He's a photographer, so why not snap pictures of landmarks? Why would you even want to do these, you ask? Because as you level up, you unlock new costumes, which can be purchased with the tokens you earn from challenges. As in, you do not have to pay a single cent for them. You hear that, Batman Arkham? Not for $5, completely for free. This is a part of the game that is objectively better than the Arkham series, and I will not have anybody tell me otherwise. This is how extras worked back in the day, folks. They were a reward. Something to keep you playing, not an excuse for them to reach back into my wallet for a second payment. Even better, the Sam Raimi suit, the one that everybody knows and is by far the most nostalgic one, the one that they could have exploited to hell and back, they gave out completely for free. You don't even have to buy the DLC in order to get it. Some of the costumes are part of the story DLC, I won't try and hide that, however it's not like you're paying for them individually. And secondly, the price of the DLC is much cheaper than all the Arkham stuff combined. Batman Arkham City is still a very good game, by the way. I have played it, I don't want anybody to think that I hate it or anything. Okay, thanks, but not only do the suits look badass, but they also come with their own little perks. Even sweeter is that the powers aren't tied to the suit itself, meaning that you can create the Spider-Man that you want. That is player respect at its finest. Now let me just take the time to say that this is one fantastic looking game. Insomniac have taken extra care to ensure that Spider-Man's world is positively bursting with life. New York is your playground to go wherever, whenever, visiting Avengers Tower, pressing X to pay respects to Uncle Ben, or just saying hello to your adoring fans. Whether it be out on patrol or admiring the cityscape from afar, this game is absolutely breathtaking. And this is just on the vanilla PS4. I also have to praise the QTE sections. Yeah, this took me by surprise. I was expecting to hate them, instead they elevated the cinematic spectacle. God of War or Uncharted will tell you to press a random button without any rhyme or reason and just kill you if you don't do it in time. In Spider-Man, if you pay close attention, you'll notice that in these sequences, they actually line up with your generic in-game actions. The square button is used for punching, so it makes sense that this button is also used for super strength. Meanwhile, the web shooters are used to stop the helicopter in the exact same way you would in-game. At no point was I confused about the button I needed to press. I knew straight away based off the action that Spider-Man was performing. This does two things. One, it stops shit like this from happening.
I'm going to die!
More importantly, it helps to gel the spectacle of your typical MCU movie with the interactivity of a video game to truly heighten both the cinematic tension and also keep you immersed from a gameplay perspective. I'll be honest, if you took the QTEs out, I don't think the story would work nearly as well. And this is coming from somebody who hates them more than Peter hates that one rice company for profiting off his uncle's death. The QTEs can also be made easier or turned off completely. As somebody who, while they still can play games perfectly fine, does suffer from difficulties when it comes to fine motor skills, I could not be happier. There have been games, several games in fact, where I've been put off playing them not because they don't look fun, but because of what they require out of the player physically. And that's just me. There are several people that are simply locked out of these games due to circumstances they weren't in control of. At the end of the day, what you're currently seeing on screen does not rely on skill, it relies on physical strength, something that some people simply won't have. Call me what you want, but I think it's ridiculously unfair for them to pay $60 for a game only to get so far into it and be unable to continue, through again circumstances that they couldn't control. Another thing, if you're going to make these bits easier, don't do the MGS approach where it ties it into difficulty. I shouldn't have to dumb my overall experience down just to get past one fucking section. I could always get the bad ending, but that completely misses the point. Spider-Man allows you to play on higher difficulties while also turning off the QTEs. You can tailor your experience to your own needs. Games mean a lot to me. I am a gamer largely in part because of my disability, and I want to see more stuff like this. The main campaign missions are great fun and packed to the brim with intense set pieces. One of my favourite missions is when Spider-Man goes to a Halloween party trying to find this professor guy, and obviously since he's already in a costume, nobody suspects him. That's really clever. The only missions that I didn't enjoy quite so much were the stealth missions with Miles and Mary Jane. Most of the time it just amounts to throw shiny thing here, hack a few things there. The enemies are more basic than MGS1 if you can believe that. When you're telling Spider-Man to do certain actions like in this one mission, it's fantastic, but I always got the sense that I'd be having more fun if I was playing as him, you know? The boss fights on the other hand, well, they are few and far between, but when they do happen, they are absolute perfection. The best fights hands down are the 2-on-1 sections with the Sinister Six. I have absolutely no clue how the geniuses at Insomniac managed it, but despite you obviously being outmatched, you never once feel overwhelmed. This can once again be attributed to a good use of visual cues and a well taught and firm understanding of the gameplay mechanics. I wasn't originally going to cover the DLC, but because I had a blast recording this and because I spent all that time bad-mouthing Arkham's DLC practices, I might as well put my money where my mouth is. The City That Never Sleeps consists of 3 episodes, one focusing on Black Cat, another on Hammerhead, and finally one on Silver Sable. I'll keep plot related details vague since this is extra stuff you're paying for. Suffice to say, while all of these stories have their connecting threads, you can very easily choose to view each of them standalone. The writing here is top notch. If I didn't want a sequel to this game before, I really want it now, like really badly. Seriously, Insomniac, just get on that straight away. If I had to complain about anything, the difficulty balancing is a bit off kilter. This is very much intended for players who have mastered the combat of the base game. The DLC introduces brutes with Gatling guns, which not only hit hard but are pretty much impossible to hit without the proper weapon. Add more than one into the mix and you've got total chaos. This package doesn't really offer anything revolutionary. I mean, you've got some new suits and some new challenges. It's basically more of the same, which isn't bad considering the base game was already hitting all the right nodes. I paid £15 for this, so roughly $20. For that price, I really don't feel like I was ripped off at all. I got what I was promised, more Spider-Man. It's rare that I go for any kind of DLC nowadays, so take that as a recommendation. I hope that by the end of this video, I've convinced you to give Spider-Man for the PlayStation 4 a chance. I promise you, this game is anything but overhyped. I would seriously recommend this to absolutely anyone, even if you're not a fan of the character in the first place. It's amazing, it's spectacular, it's ultimate, it's superior, it's whatever positive adjective you can bloody well throw at it. It's Spider-Man for the PlayStation 4.